Hello, I am back. um, yes, I've been gone about 4 or 5 days. Not been recording, getting reacclimated to my day job after nearly a month of convalescing at home and quarantining. So I'm kind of eager to talk about some movies. I've been kind of nourishing myself with cinema along with other art forms and working on my own art when I wasn't too overwhelmed with everything that kind of caused me to drop out of day to day life to begin with here. It's a new year. Doesn't necessarily mean anything in and of itself, except, astronomically. But uh, I'm trying to see it as a renewal. I'm not falling into the it's got to be better than 2020, and hopefully now we'll cure the world of this horrid, dread COVID plague. I mean, those would be great things, but on a personal level, I feel like I suffered like a series of personal apocalypses in 2020, and every step forward there would be several steps back, and it's caused me a good deal of consternation. Some of which I've shared on these soul bearing videos of mine. Uh, but art remains my solace, my refuge, my throughway to some kind of truth and illumination in this fucked up life we're in. I'm going to turn this down here. And so I guess the best thing to do to get back on my feet and get back into doing these videos regularly to where I can do some hopefully illuminating videos of the nature of the soul bearing ones, and some helpful ones, hopefully, like the imaginary film class. My way to get back into that is just to kind of hurl myself into it, and the easiest theme that I was able to come up with, it's one I use quite a bit, but I watch a lot of these titles, so it's convenient. And they're all top-notch releases. So I'm talking about, of course, the Criterion Collection. Um, I'm going to talk about a few until I'm probably like worn out on talking about them. So let's see how many of these I can cover. These are ones that I've watched in the last 2 weeks. Most of them I've watched at least twice, and at least some of the supplements. And I have kind of a good idea of what to recommend, what to point out. It's important, and what I liked about the films and the presentation. So I'm going to go ahead and start with one that I've been a fan of since the 1990s. I never really owned this movie on any home video format until recently. I've been talking a lot about its director recently. I reviewed what I consider his masterpiece for the Christmas special, or the Xmas special, Die Nibelungen. So we're talking about Fritz Lang, and I'm going to talk about M. I hope you can see that with the glare. Perhaps if I did it this side. It's a dark cover. It's a dark movie. But beautiful. There's Peter Lorre and the incriminating M. So M is probably his most famous, I guess, critically famous movie after Metropolis. Maybe not, and it's not his most mainstream. Those would probably be movies like Scarlet Street and Woman in the Window among his noirs and crime films. And of course, Die Nibelungen is an epic, but it never quite crossed over. And then he did a number of other films. Probably the closest that had some crossover success was his serial, Dr. Mabuse the Gambler, and some others in that Mabuse series. But M kind of stands, powerfully tall like Metropolis. very much nothing like Metropolis. Metropolis is dystopian science fiction. He's commenting on a lot of things, uh, how automation is ultimately going to dehumanize, uh, humans, and and the dire effects of that. Technology and the state, and how the state employs technology to keep us in these little racing rabbit hole, rabbit, whatever they call them, mazes. Um, M is quite a bit more naturalistic. Um, Beautiful, kind of serene black and white photography, and it's Germany, 1931, and I believe the inspiration for, excuse me, it's not the company. I believe the inspiration for M were some real life German child murderers. I'm not sure if they were contemporaneous with M exactly or not, or if it came a few years before M. I used to know all this, being kind of a true crime aficionado. Um, but I would say Peter Curtin, I believe, was one, a child killer, and Fritz Harmon was another. There was actually a semi-fictionalized movie about Fritz Harmon, uh, directed by Uli Lommel, one of Rainer Werner Fassbinder's proteges, called The Tenderness of the Wolves, starring Kurt Raub, one of Fassbinder's kind of repertory company, as this kind of loathsome, almost vampiric kind of murderer, preying especially on younger boys and things of that nature. So, Tenderness of the Wolves, I had a DVD and I sold it a few months ago. I had it for a number of years. It's one that never quite, to me, lived up to its reputation. Um, and that's true of a lot of Uli Lommel stuff. I mean, Uli Lommel was great as an actor, and he did some interesting and fun movies like The Boogeyman, and some of his later serial killer opuses, like the hilarious Dahmer, starring Jeremy Hawkeye Renner. But his work with Fassbender is what distinguished him, and I think this was his attempt to do a commercial horror film, but also work under the aegis of RWF. M is a different animal altogether. Extremely well made. Just it is, and it does have that noir feeling. I mean, it's a strong bridge from the Impressionism to the German Expressionism, I guess you would say, to the noir style that a lot of these German auteurs brought into Hollywood in the late 30s through the early 50s, after they fled Nazi Germany. People like Billy Wilder and Fritz Lang, obviously, among them, the most well known. Um, so M is basically a series of child murders or disappearances, and they never quite say exactly what happens to these children, but it's no good. They hint that it's rather perverse. Obviously, murder, it's a big part of it, but they kind of broadly hint that there is a sexual element to it, kind of a deviant pedophiliac element to it. And sometimes you see the killer at a remove, you don't see his face or hear his voice clearly, but he's kind of trying to, you know, uh, get some kids to come along with him so that he can, buy them a toy or a balloon or play with them. And of course, his ultimate goal is far from that. But though in a way, the killer has a childlike mind. Perhaps he does relate to children on that level, and to him this is playing, but it gets out of hand because his psychosexual compulsions kind of take over, and there's nothing childlike about those. Um, Peter Lorre plays the killer, child murderer. And the really cool thing about this story is it's a very cool police procedural, and you have Inspector Lomon, who's kind of a bullish, indomitable kind of guy heading this investigation, but he's kind of a blowhard, to be honest. I mean, I personally didn't find him a very sympathetic character, though I'm well aware he's supposed to be one. But it's kind of like Popeye Doyle in The French Connection. He's supposed to be the good guy, but not somebody I'd ever want to have rescue me from any problem. But that could be true of police in general these days. The thing about Lomon is it's not that he's inept, it's just that he's not. I mean, he's got a wide dragnet, but this killer is wily. Adobe Wile E. Coyote. He's very he's hard to trace. So a lot of the bad press being given to the criminal underworld in Germany at this time within the movie is because the police are putting forth this idea that it's one of them, one of their own. And they know it's not, because child rapists and murderers are on the very bottom of their totem pole, the lowest rung of their hierarchy of shunned and hated felons. And so they themselves mobilize to find the killer themselves and wreak their own form of justice upon him. And they employ these beggars in the streets as informants. And these guys have their fingers on the pulse more than any of the cops or the undercover cops or whatever that are kind of approaching this in a, they're being aggressive, but they're not really thinking outside of the box. Criminals live outside of the box, so that's kind of their thing. So they go about this and are able to kind of capture this guy. He's tricked into being tattooed, so to speak. White chalk is written on a man's palm. A lot of the posters show that imagery on the palm. And when he sees the suspected killer talking to a child, he kind of bumps into him and slaps him on the shoulder, and he's got a black coat. So you see that this guy has got the M. So the M right here is on this guy's shoulder, and that marks him for the other gang members to round up. And he lends them a merry chase. It's pretty exciting, down into the underground and all kinds of kind of labyrinthine halls of their hideouts. And finally, he can't really resist anymore, and he's put on to trial. And he's given you could call it a mock trial, you could call it a real trial. I mean, obviously our man, Peter Lorre, does not believe it's a real trial. Excuse me. He sees it as fake and unfair, of course. And what right do these criminals, these hoodlums, have to judge him? And of course, then he brings forward the idea, I can't help it. This is a compulsion that I cannot shake. And the one problem in the plot, which no one brings up later on as a counterpoint to young Lorre, is that the killer is not only perpetrating these crimes, he's writing these elaborate letters to the police, mocking them and tormenting them and bragging about what's going to happen next. To me, that sounds like a great amount of premeditation and ulterior motives and malicious intent that go far beyond the uncontrollable compulsion. I'm sure that's part of it. The sexual aspect is it there, but I think he revels in his crimes. And he tries to convince the criminals, and by extension, the audience, that that is the case. He does not revel in his crimes. Well, you know, you watch the entire movie beginning to end, and yes, he does quite revel in his crimes. He's really just freaked out because he's been caught. He's really a weak, uh, craven individual. Now, that's not to say he isn't mentally aberrant and might not want to change his psychosexual compulsions, but he also is knowingly a criminal, putting it to the cops, every chance he gets. So he really has no moral high road upon which to judge this quorum of criminals who have decided to um, execute his final fate. He's given a lawyer, legal counselor among one of the criminals, and that man argues for his life. And there's some back and forth, but M is kind of doomed. I'm gonna call him M. I don't know if his character ever has a proper name. M for murderer, what have you. Um, this was a great movie. I can watch this thing over and over. The look of it is fantastic. 1931 Germany. I don't know, the black and white chiaroscuro kind of proto noir photography is impeccable, and the performances are chilling. There's long periods where I notice in movies right in this period, like beginning of the silent era, when you'd have like say 1930, 31, 32, you would have movies that have long passages that are quiet. I mean, they're going to have dialogue here and there because they are finally sound films, but they don't have any music. And that lends a good bit of atmosphere and kind of a chilling, like, you're on your own here. You can't depend on these music cues to tell you how to feel and how to react. Quite a refreshing change from the way mainstream suspense films the last few decades have, relentlessly pounded us over the head with this kind of thing. I don't, amazingly, I do not need John Williams or James Horner to remind me that this is when I'm supposed to feel something. That's extremely manipulative filmmaking. So it's nice to see an era where that was, where there was some bombastic, dramatic music, certainly, sometimes inappropriately for sure, but there was also a bit more of the piece had a room to breathe, sonically. It was a room to breathe where you could kind of interweave the dialogue, sparse music, and ambient sounds, and it created an atmosphere. And I love that stuff. That's a great era. So this Blu-ray's fabulastic, and it's, if that's a word. And one of my favorite thing is on here was the interview between William Friedkin and Fritz Lang from, I guess, the late 70s. And Friedkin had achieved a great deal of notoriety by that time, the French Connection, The Exorcist, so on. And he's very pointed in his questioning of Lang. And Lang kind of calls him out a few times, like basically, well, what are you saying? This really isn't that necessary a thing to talk about. Lang has the wisdom. Friedkin has the youthful enthusiasm of the arts. Lang's is a little more jaded, but it's filled with so much wisdom and knowledge, information, that it's just a treasure to behold. And that interview, he goes through various stages of his career. He does touch on M, and of course Metropolis and several others. But I have to say that that's one of the best kind of, Truffaut on Hitchcock kind of interviews I've seen on camera through a Criterion Collection, and they do that kind of stuff periodically. I'm referring to the book where Truffaut that collected all these famous interviews Truffaut did with Hitchcock late in Hitchcock's career, which was relatively early in Truffaut's career, because Truffaut and a lot of the French New Wave began as film critics for magazines like Cahiers du Cinema and stuff. Um, so yeah, there's other extras. I can't say that any of them are as incredible as that one. Um, but there are. Unfortunately, the light in here is kind of rough. I'm trying to recall them. I may not come up with something solid before before this piece is destined to end. But take my word for it, they're in there. The movie itself is great. Interview itself is great. But yeah, there are other pieces of memorabilia and uh, commentary that helps put things into perspective. And that's what I like about Criterion, is they're able to create a whole package that is not only the movie at the heart of it, but as it's meant to be seen, but also the context through which you can enjoy the movie through the essays, the supplemental features. It's a treat. You can put in a Criterion disc and you can have it on for a few hours, between the film, the audio commentary, perhaps other versions of the film, and then all of these other supplements, and the time you're spent reading these massive essays like this one in here. This is amazing. This is just a huge, giant undertaking. It's really just a book and the booklet and the credits. And then you got Stanley Kaufman, The Mark of M, and some other essays in here. And Fritz Lang's M, Filmed Sadism by Gabrielle Turgott. These are beautiful. I'll be honest, I haven't read enough of these essays. I used to read them all, just devour them. But I have quite a little backlog of ones I need to complete. Anyway, recommended. Miss out on it at your own peril. This was an amusing one. Eating Raoul, a movie years ago you probably would never conceive of as being a Criterion Collection title, but here it is, man. Eating Raoul. And Paul and Mary's Country Kitchen. This is a comedy classic. This is kind of definitely of the 80s. I think it's 82, and it's wow. It's kind of where various strains of humor kind of come together. There's anarchic kind of underground humor like John Waters and George Bouchard, up to the punk and new wave scene and just that whole kind of milieu. Even though that milieu is really not explored in this film, you can tell it's after that era, or it's within that era. And some surreal satire and just some dark humor. The kinds of humor that I enjoy, that I respond to, that I find are hilarious, which may not be everyone's cup of poison. Paul and Mary Bland, played by Paul Bartel, the director, and Mary Warrenoff, the great, legendary cult film icon. They first worked together on Death Race 2000. They play Paul and Mary Bland, and they're basically an asexual couple who's kind of transcended their need for sex. Go figure. And or so they think. And but ironically, they get involved in a way to bilk people out of money. Well, actually, just bonk them out of money by luring them to their house for an alleged tryst to fulfill all these kinky, perverse fetishes they have with young Mary. And they are you know, what did William Burroughs say? No, no one can own life, but anyone who can hold a frying pan can own death. And Paul owns death. He just clanks down on these guys just as they're getting ready to seriously molest his wife. And they take their money and they dispose of their body. And then they make a partnership with this cat named Raoul, played by Robert Beltran, later of Night of the Comet and Star Trek Voyager as Chakotay. This is early Beltran, and this might be his first movie, possibly. That guy's hilarious. He was multi-talented, and he was a really cool guy back then. His appearance by him is always going to liven up the proceedings. And he plays this kind of smooth talking Chicano, you know, and basically he kind of plies Mary with the Latin lover thing, and it starts to work, you know, with some high stick and some other accoutrements to enhance and alter her perceptions. He's managing to seduce her despite her prudery. Of course, Paul hasn't been, you know, filled in on this, but he suspects. Earl helps them kill one particularly rowdy patron of Mary, and Raoul manages to take these people's cars and turn them around for profit without giving Mary and Paul any of that profit. However, they do share in some of the other profit, and part of the ancillary profit coming out of this is that, you know, the deal is that Raoul will take care of the bodies for them. Raoul does take care of the bodies for them, but he he feeds them to he gives them as raw material for this cat food company he works for, Shades of the Corpse Grinders, and it's just ridiculous. It's morbid and ridiculous, much like the Corpse Grinders was. And finally, though, his kind of, how to put it, misappropriation of the deceased and the whole eating the flesh of the deceased, it kind of karmically comes around on young Raoul, hence the title of the film. And you have kind of an amusing ending. So I like it. It was great. There's some great interviews on here. This disc, Beltrans are very interesting. Warnoff, she is an absolute trip. She is just like a diva of cult film. And to this day has this just powerful personality and tell it like it is nature. There are two short films by Bartel from the 60s. One is called The Secret Cinema, which is really fascinating. It's kind of it's about a woman who gets involved with some people making a film, and it turns out they're making a film about her life, and you're basically spying on her and capturing all her reactions, and she's kind of like trying to stop this from being shown. And I don't know, maybe some of these movies like The Truman Show or what have you were influenced by it. I don't know. There's another short which is a bit more incoherent and avant-garde, and I can't quite remember the name off the top of my head, but it was still interesting. These are both very good signs of some of the direction Bartel was going to go in with movies like, I believe he did that one in the 70s called Private Parts, I think. Not to be confused with the Howard Stern thing. And then segued into Death Race 2000 via Corman, and then onward into this. And of course, the whole thing kind of climaxed in '89 with scenes from the class struggle in Beverly Hill, which had a lot of the same cast members as his other films, albeit with a couple of other big stars. And it was just an all-out savage parody on the rich, kind of a bourgeoisie dark bourgeoisie parody, almost Buñuelian at times. Um, I just started watching that for the first time ever this week on YouTube. I'm about a third of the way through it. I'm enjoying it. You know, it's got Beltran and Warrenov and Bartel, and then it's got, you know, Jacqueline Bisset of all people. Um, Ed Begley Jr. He was also in Eating Raoul. Uh, it's fun. It's like definitely, you know, Eating Raoul is kind of announcing the '80s, the anarchic, you know, new wave '80s. Anything goes. You know, let's announce it and parody it at the same time. Uh, class scenes and scenes from the class struggle in Beverly Hills is 1989, and it's kind of like ushering the '80s out. You know, the '80s has hit the height of its excess and its predictability and its cliches, and the dynasty generation is shifting. But we're going to go ahead and, you know, poke a few last um, holes in their you know, nails in their coffin before we surrender to the '90s. Um, I don't know the current home video status of class struggle in Beverly Hills, so I have to plead the fifth on that one. I'm going to talk about one more, which I have on in the background. This will be the hardest one for me to talk to, so I'm going to try to keep this relatively short. And this is a movie that a great deal of my friends online in the cult movie circles are huge fans of and have been into a lot longer than me. And I believe I use this word loosely with a movie like this. They understand it more than I do at this juncture. It's an inscrutable film by Louis Malle called Black Moon, and you know, what can you say? The disc is in the player. Nice poster. Black Moon is, you know, there's not a lot of extras on here. There's some behind the scenes photos and an archival video interview with Louis Malle, a trailer, and there is a booklet essay which I probably should reread. But essentially, the answers or lack of answers lie within the film's 100-minute running time. So to say what it's about, either plot-wise, as in what's happening on the surface, the formal level, and what does it all mean, getting back to that chestnut, both are hard to discern. Sometimes the themes of what it's trying to say are easier to discern than what is actually happening in front of you. So if you're expecting a plot explanation, that's never going to happen. You know, it makes Lynch, you know, look extremely conventional in his storytelling techniques. But it's uniquely French too. There's just a lot of non sequiturs, a lot of strange and surreal incidents. But the way I see it, and I could well be wrong, is this young woman happens upon this property, the tail end of some kind of society changing apocalypse of sorts. And there seem to be a lot of women in army uniforms with automatic weapons regulating things. There seem to be a lot of animals running free and children running free, naked and through the woods. And it's all around this estate where she happens upon this strange older lady who's kind of sequestered in her bedroom, and they have some very bizarre exchanges. This woman's family, played by Joe D'Alessandro and Alexandra Stewart, two extremely inscrutable siblings who kind of, I don't know, they like to eat and ride horses, and there's maybe some sexual tension hinted at in between them. Um, but they're not much help to our heroine. Um, Not sure our heroine has a name. Well, it's Lily. That's correct. It is Lily. And Lily is just kind of lost, and she's kind of this almost innocent-ish character filled with wonderment, like Alice in Wonderland. And she's going way into the rabbit hole, and so there's all these weird conundrums and things that, like I said, non sequiturs that don't really seem to have any literal meaning, but the symbols are hard to divine for me at this time. Now, the more I watch this, the more I may be able to dig underneath the crust of this and excavate some meaning. It does veer off into just from the surreal into the sheer fantasy. And when it does that, much as when Lynch does it in Twin Peaks, that's when I find the material they're most rewarding. Not just because I like fantasy, but because you've taken leave of the literal minded viewpoint, the linear, ABC logic that we're kind of Aristotelian logic we're conditioned with, and this is embodied in a character that's a unicorn. And after a while, the unicorn begins to speak to Lily, and the unicorn is, as a guy I know online mentioned to me the other day, it's a female creature with a long phallic horn. So that alone is a commentary on gender and such. And really, kind of a lot of this may have to do with just you're seeing this weird world right here on the cusp of breaking down and disintegration of family and gender roles. And Lily is trying to find, what works for her, and the character she's the most taken with is the unicorn. And for a while, the unicorn is just kind of a mysterious MacGuffin, but then the unicorn began speaking to her, and that unicorn is probably the finest actor in the film. I don't know where they found the horse that they put the horn and every other stuff on, but right on. I mean, it's very well directed, and the voice is kind of amusing. It's sort of coming out of the mouth and some of not. I mean, it's really just the horse, chewing its own, cud, so to speak. But they line up the dial, the words with that. No CGI, like the fox in Antichrist, Chaos Reigns. It doesn't look like that. But because it doesn't look like that, it looks even more surreal. Like this voice is coming out of this. The voice is coming out of this creature, not necessarily is it speaking literally with its, vocal cords. I watched this movie twice. I have it on here on the side. This would be the third time, and not much happens in the traditional sense. So the movie kind of just whirls by for me without much really explanation, and you feel like you haven't really made much progress in discerning what is this young woman's odyssey about. So it's really, I've got to say, an inner odyssey, that these external bizarre happenstances that she happens upon uh, on this stretch of land they're really just maybe more symbolic or symbolic challenges to her, of her conceptions of things. She has kind of a weird back and forth relationship with the old lady, the matriarch, and the matriarch kind of swings madly, speaking different languages, including just what appears to be kind of just nonsense or just animalistic sounds. Um, So we're in the same position as Lily. We don't know what the hell is going on. And so when we see the unicorn is like, hey, that's a unicorn. Unicorn is a symbolic entity, a magic entity. The unicorn must have the answers. And the unicorn tries to dispense the answers. The unicorn seems mostly concerned about its own sanity. And with the humans that it's around, I wouldn't blame it at all. So you never quite know what the unicorn is, other than it fulfills this function of this woman's odyssey. What is her odyssey? It doesn't. It's like a microcosm. It doesn't go any further out, than we're shown. It's just her moving into this world. We're not sure where she came from, where she's trying to go, and she really has no clue, really, what is happening to her. So, and I'll be honest, I really don't either. But I did enjoy it. I did enjoy Black Moon. It's a unique kind of film. It's been growing on me each time I've watched it. The first time it left me a little confused and cold. Second time I enjoyed it, but I wasn't sure what to make of it. That's just on in the background now. I'm kind of just letting the ambient experience kind of, sink in and permeate. So that's my blue review for this time span. We talked about three, can you see that? 3 exciting movies, or 3 interesting movies at least. Got plenty others to talk about, Criterion and non-Criterion, but I wanted to get back into this game, and I wanted everyone to know that I'm doing better than I was. There's still a lot of struggle. The crash site's still a mess, physically and emotionally, but I am out there making more money and solidifying my security in the only way I know how, ways I know how. And my eBay is picking up a slight bit after lengthy moribund period. I have moved on to a next level as far as coping with my ex-fiance and all those emotions. The emotions are still there, but I am trying to deal with it in a different way and accept certain things that have been hard to accept. This is a daily struggle. So, I'll have good days, I'll have bad days. I see good spirits, I see bad spirits. Anyway, I hope to see you next time. Thank you. I really appreciate the support. Please subscribe. And please give me a thumbs up. It'll really help me. So far, my most popular videos have had 6 thumbs up. I've got to start breaking that, because I know more than 6 people are watching this. Perhaps those people watching it don't think it's worthy of a thumbs up, in which case that's cool. I mean, if that's your honest opinion. But, if you want to support, just hit a few buttons there, and I would really, really appreciate it, because I'm probably going to be doing this for quite a long time. I don't expect it's going to be any kind of money-making venture going forward, but I do enjoy it as a creative outlet, and I do like sharing information. It's a catharsis for sure. And it's just fun to talk about the things I'm passionate about in the arts, and hopefully get some more discussion going. So far, the comments have been pretty dead, but if there's any anecdotes or things that occur to you, or things you like about or dislike about something I say, feel free to comment down there. And until next time, take care. Thank you for watching.